Welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a cheap 12-speed conversion. We're going to take this 2016 Trek Xcalber 8, set up with a 2x10, and turning it into a sleek 1x12 cross-country machine. This is what it's going to look like when it's all done. Hope you guys enjoy the tips and tricks I share in this video. And if you like what you're seeing, like and subscribe. Alright, so here's the parts I'm using for my cheap 1x conversion. Going from 2x10 on my Trek Xcalber 8 2016 to a 1x12 setup. Alright, first piece of the drivetrain I'm going to show you is my SunRace CSMZ90 cassette. I reviewed this in a previous video. It came in at $528. It does have the center plastic hub spacer inside of it right now to keep it together. So it's coming in at $541.1. Picked this up off Amazon. It was around $105. Next up is the SRAM XX1 Eagle Shifter. It does have the old cable on it. I picked this up used off Marketplace. That's coming in at $132.3. I was able to pick up the shifter and the XX1 Derailleur for a steal. I got them for $200 together. The thing that separates the XX1 is this whole cage is carbon, so it's supposed to be lighter, better shifting. That's coming in at $268.8. I did go ahead and pick up a 1x crank. I'm running a GXP bottom bracket, and I was able to find this on Marketplace as well. It was $60. Even though it says 11 speed on there, they will work with the 12 speed setups. The interior of the chain is the same. I'm going to see if I can set this on here to get a weight. I'm looking at 780.8. And included for the $60, it did come with a used GXP bottom bracket, which is in really good shape. I'm going to use this to take my old 2x10 parts and put them onto a Trek Marlin. And that's at 108. I cleaned it up a little bit. But not least needed for the drivetrain is the chain. It's inside its packing grease, packing oil, so I don't want to take it out. I'll just weigh after the chains I don't use, the links I don't use in the case, but it's got its master link in there as well. That's coming in at 301.9. Alright, here's the before on the bike. As you can see, it's got a 2x10 setup, the S1000 GXP 2x crank in the front, GX derailleur 10-speed, and I upgraded the cassette previously to a 10x40 SunRace. And here's the shifters. It's rear 10-speed. So before we get started, we're going to clean the bike off. We've got some liquid dish soap. We've got a sprayer nozzle for an insecticide. Just picked up at Harbor Freight. Also have a sprayer bottle that's filled with dish soap and water, and then some degreaser. We probably won't need the degreaser right now because the bike is fairly clean. Here's a time lapse of me cleaning the bike. First, I'm going to start by taking off my Mucky Nuts mud guards. I love them. It's been a little tacky here in the Dallas area with the rain we've had, so it keeps the bike clean. Right now in the sprayer is just water. I'm going to spray down the bike and loosen everything up first. Try to get in all the nooks and crannies. I'm going to add a little bit of the soap. That soap's about done. Just blue dishwashing soap. Pump it up, and then I'm going to spray it with a light coat of the mixture. That wasn't enough, so I'm going to a little bit higher concentration than I have in the spray bottle. Just spraying down stanchions and anywhere where mud's going to be, where I'm going to be working on the bike, around the cassette and the crank. Then I'm going to give it a wipe down. And I'm going to try to clean the chain off here as best I can as well. And held it up pretty dirty. And here you go. You've got it in the stand now, and we're ready to start the conversion. Alright, so now we're going to start the conversion. First thing we're going to do is remove the master link and the 10-speed chain using the Park Tool MLP 1.2 master link pliers. They make quick work of this. Then we're going to remove the pedals. Always remember to remove your pedals, turn towards the rear of the bike. I'd pre-loosen these. L handles have two ways you can use them. One is to break open the bolt, which is the L side, and the other is to quickly turn, which is the longer side, which I'm using, as you can see as I remove them. Then we're going to go to the rear cassette. We're going to use a T-handle to remove the wire and then take off the crimp. And then remove the derailleur using a T-handle as well. And now the goat link. So my old derailleur required a goat link because of the new cassette being larger. So now we're going to remove the front derailleur. You always want to make sure there's no tension on the cable when you're removing front or rear derailleurs. I shifted it so there's no tension. I'm going to remove the cable and then use a T-handle to remove the Allen bolt, securing it to the seat tube. Next, we're going to remove the cable and cable housing that runs from the front shifter down to the front derailleur. Here I'm removing my ODI Ruffian grips. I'm going to take off my Shimano brakes and then also the 2x front shifter, which will never be seen again on this bike. While I'm here working on the handlebars, I'm going to take off my right side ODI Ruffian grip, Shimano brake, and rear shifter. I'm going to pull out a little bit of the cable from the housing and remove it. Here's the new shifter, XX1. Slides right on the handlebar. And I'm going to inspect the old cable housing. It's going to zoom in here. The housing is a little old, but I'm going to reuse it because it's still shifting nice and smooth. There shouldn't be any of those wires sticking out of the end, but it'll be okay. Take care if you're reusing a cut cable that you don't fray it when you're putting it into the cable housing. And I'm just going to run this with a little bit of force all the way into the back, and it'll pop out, and it doesn't even pop the ferrule off the end of the housing. It's looking pretty good. So here I'm just securing some things in the cockpit. I'm going to make sure that they're tight so they're not flopping around, and I am going to do a small adjustment on this shifter so that when I get the derailleur installed, I can run through the gears and make sure it's shifting nice. But it's not crucial to be perfectly aligned right now at this step. I'm going to remove the rear wheel so I can put on the new cassette now. As you can see, I've got some more tools here. Got the bottom bracket and lock ring tool and the cassette pliers. To remove the cassette pliers, they're going to hold the cassette and the lock ring will pop right off. Once you get the lock ring off, you just slide the cassette off of the hub, and then you want to inspect the hub and make sure that there's not any gouging. My hub's in pretty good shape. These wheels have a steel hub, and with aluminum spiders, it's not going to mess it up too bad. Here's the new cassette, and also some finish line ceramic grease. We're going to coat the hub with a little bit of grease before we slide on the new cassette, just to ensure that it doesn't seize itself on the hub while we're using it. And then the new cassette's going to just slide right on. It is indexed. There's one small spline. And then you're going to pop the lock ring back on and then tighten it. You should tighten it to 40 Newton meters, but I've been doing it long enough I can just do it by hand. And then the rear wheel is going to go back into the dropouts. And you're going to tighten it up. And then I'm going to spin it here to make sure that it isn't wobbling or out of alignment or anything. Now we're going to start working on the front crank. and I just give it a little spin, an homage to Hambini. So the SRAM GXP cranks are self-extracting. So you're gonna take an 8mm Allen wrench, stick it in there, and it'll back itself out. It's pushing against a 10mm nut that's on the end of it, which you'll see better when we install the new crank, which is right here. So you've got the washer, which goes on the inner nut, and the 10mm. This is going to get a little bit of grease as well. You want to coat the spindle on both ends where it contacts the bearings. You want to put a decent amount of grease, but not too much. You can't really overdo it, but there's no point to waste grease. It's pretty expensive. Just showing you here how I coat all the mating surfaces that are going to mate with the bearing. Now I'm going to slide it in here to the bottom bracket, and then to tap-a-roo. And one of the main reasons why I used this crank is because I wasn't going to have to replace the bottom bracket. I was lucky enough to find this cheap for only 60 bucks with another bottom bracket, which I didn't need. And the guy even went and found that star washer or seal, which is really important. You have to have that. He had to rummage through a box that it was in to find it. So it's going to go on, and you want to make sure that you have your cranks opposed at 180 degrees. And then I'm going to slowly screw back in the 8mm. These are very fine threads, so you want to take care to make sure that you're not cross-threading them. And I'm barely putting any pressure when I'm putting it in with the L handle. So then I'm getting it to a point, I'm spinning it again. If you don't know who Hambini is, I'll explain in a second. And then I'm going to use the side to tighten it. What I'm trying to do is set the preload so that there's no slack between the two crank arms and they're tight against the bolts. You can't over tighten these. That's why I keep spinning the crank to make sure that it's rotating freely. And then give it one more good tighten. And it's Hambini approved. Just a little bit more. And now we're going to put out the outer lock ring. I'm going to use a 10mm L handle from Feedback Sports. Love their tools. They make great stuff. And this one, you really have to be careful not to cross thread, because it's got even finer threads than the 8mm that goes in first that actually secures the crank. So you'll see me run it one direction, and then I'll get it started, and then I'll tighten it. And there you go. So Hambini is a aerodynamic engineer that roasts people online. And he does bottom brackets for all the big teams. So now we're finally to the derailleur install, and we're using a 5mm T-handle from Feedback. They're made really well. And it's important to note that there's a little dog that catches on your derailleur hanger, and you need to make sure you have those aligned. So this is a 5mm bolt, and I'm making sure to rotate it freely, that it's properly aligned onto the dog. Now that screw next to my left thumb is the B tension screw. We'll set that once we get the chain on, but you want to make sure that that's resting on the dog and the derailleur hanger. And here you can see the alignment's pretty good. There's no tension in the derailleur, so it should be lined up with the smallest cog on the cassette. If it's not, then we can work that out when we're starting to adjust the derailleur. So now I'm just taking the end of the shift cable and routing it through the pulley. I had a little bit of trouble with it because I snipped off the end. Normally they're soldered and they're all solid, and there's a little bit of tension to make that 90-degree turn around the pulley. And then once you're through the pulley, you can feed it into the catch, and you can tighten down your 25T Torx. And it's important to remember that you need to have the shifter in the right orientation. You need to have it with no tension, which on the SRAM shifters is the smaller of the two thumb buttons. And that way there's no tension in the cable, so that when you actually do move it through the cassette, it'll go up through the cassette. So I'm trying to set inner and outer stops there a little bit. Looks like my outer stop is pretty much bang on. And now I'm going to put on the chain. Alright, so now we're going to put on the chain. Pretty straightforward process. This is a narrow wide chain ring, so you want to make sure it's orientated correctly around the crank. I'm using the big to big method here to size it. And I'm counting 5 rivets away from where they meet. One word of suggestion is you can always make the chain smaller, but it's a pain to try to make it bigger. So I suggest if you err on the side of making it too long, and then you can go back and take a link or two out if you need to. I had the Feedback Sports chain tool there that came in the Pro Toolkit. Then I'm just routing it through the derailleur and then putting on the master link, and boom, there you go. This derailleur is clutched, so I'm releasing the clutch to put tension back into the drivetrain, and I've got it on the smallest cog setting because I didn't have any tension in the cable. And now I'm going to run up through the gears and see how it's shifting, and it started out pretty well right out of the box, mainly because I set right and left alignment screws pretty well. There was a couple tweaks I need to do with the barrel adjuster on the shifter. You always want to make sure that you know how many turns from closest in to closest out on the barrel adjuster on the shifter, and you want to set it right in the middle. And so there it is, all done. And it's ready to ride now. Can't wait to take this out on the trails. I've been waiting a while to have it done, and it's definitely worth it. Alright, so here's the box of parts off the Xcalber 8 to see if we picked up any weight savings. So here's the cassette, which only weighs 399.9, so 400 grams on the cassette. Took off 2 shifters and put on 1. So rear shifter is 137.7. Front shifter is 133. Together they're 270.7. Front derailleur, which we didn't put one back on, so this is going to be a weight savings of 147.9. Rear derailleur of 246.7, and new cassette came with a goat link because the cage wasn't long enough on the derailleur, so 16.1. And then the crank feels pretty light, actually. Let's see if I can get it to sit in here. Actually, you know what, let's just put 1 and I'll put this on top. Crank is 810.3. Okay, to sum everything up, I wanted to do a side-by-side comparison of weights and then what I paid for the conversion. So we're going to start with a shifter, 132.3 grams, derailleur 268.8, crank 780.8, cassette 541.1. So that puts us at 1723 for the parts we put on. And we removed 2 old shifters, 270.7, a old derailleur, 246.7, the old 2x crank, 810.3, the 11 to 40 cassette 10-speed, 399.9, the goat link, 16.1, and then a front derailleur, which we didn't install a new one. So that puts the group set that we pulled off at 1891.6. So we lost 186.6 grams. So we really didn't save that much weight. And the prices, we paid 100 for the shifter used, 100 for the derailleur. We got them in a package deal, 200 off Facebook Marketplace. The crank we got in a package deal off Marketplace for 30. And the cassette we bought new for 109. So the total was 339. If you go online right now, the NX group set is running $275 cheapest. The recommended price from SRAM is $375, but you're hard pressed to find it in stock anywhere. So I got better upgraded derailleur and shifter with the aftermarket cassette, and I saved myself a little bit of money. So it came in about $35 under MSRP. Thanks. And if you like this video, please like or subscribe.